All right, back in the pack, Ultra Guy. I'm really, really excited for this one. I know I say that each week, but all my guests have been so amazing so far. I've been so inspired by their stories. Um, I have never actually talked with Carolyn yet. This is the first time we're actually visiting, but I found her story from the Arizona Monster, well, excuse me, Destination Races. The who puts on the Monster? They posted a video with her in it, and it was so inspiring to me. I just reached right out and I just tried to send a message to her and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on. This is so awesome." And I won't spoil. I'll let her tell the story about why she was in that video, and it was so inspiring. But this week's guest, we have Carolyn Garriott from I about said Minnesota. Goodness gracious, Montana.
Yeah.
Very different places from Montana with us today. And I'm
Yeah.
so excited to do this. Carolyn, we always just get started off just giving a little bit of background about yourself. Nothing from, so detailed that we're talking about kindergarten or anything, but, where did you grow up and where, what did you like to do when you were younger? Was it athletics and how you started to find yourself getting more involved with athletics and even into racing? So I'll turn the time over to you, and I'd love to hear it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Carolyn Garriott here. I live in Bozeman, Montana, and I was a mountain biker primarily out of high
Nice.
school. I fell in love with mountain biking and grew up in Marin County, California, and would take my bike everywhere up into the headlands above San Francisco. There's lots of great trails up there for mountain bikers. I lived in Fairfax, California. There's a lot of mountain biking in Fairfax. And so through high school and the few years after that, during college, I was primarily a mountain biker. And then I met my future husband. I was in college. I met my future husband, and he was a runner, and he was a pretty good runner, and introduced me to trail running. And it was something that we could do together and spend the time. And I really just fell in love with the trails and running that way. And I sort of stopped mountain biking. I just fell in love with trail running, just like that. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. And it was it was great. I just loved every minute of it, and just slowly started getting into running with him. We got married soon after that, and then we had some children, and so I started using running as a way to get back in shape after each pregnancy. I had three daughters. But also it was good for navigating the stresses of being a new mom or whatever was happening in life at the time. Just trail running became this wonderful experience that I just loved, fell in love with it. And then I would run a lot in the Marin Headlands overlooking San Francisco. A lot of the
Mm.
places that I mountain biked, I would trail run. So there, it was a dual purpose out there. Um, yeah, so that's how I
Awesome.
started.
So what uh, I'd like to frame this right because one of my guests, um, he started trail running when he was younger. He's my age in his mid 40s, and his dad was actually into trail running before that.
Uh,
And and I don't think people understand. I don't know what time frame this is, but if it was, you know, not too long ago, trail running wasn't as big as it is now. You know what
True.
I mean? For the
Yeah.
ultra scene. So I don't know if your husband was into ultras or if it was just he enjoyed being on the trails, but that kind of was not a thing. Uh, we you have Western states, and a handful of people going to Western states, nothing like it is now. So
Nothing
I'd
like
be
it.
interested to hear about that. When you were introduced to trail running, was ultra even a thing at that point, or did you just enjoy being on the trails together?
I didn't even know what ultra running was. I just fell in love with running on the trails, and it started slowly. In where I grew up in Marin County, there's one of the oldest races that California has is called the Dipsy Race. And I think that was one of the first races that I heard about. And it's a 7 mile stretch from Mill Valley, California, over to Stinson Beach. And it's very, very popular. And you have to qualify to get into that race. So, well, first you have to mail in your ballot, and if they pick you, then you race the race, and then if you're fast enough and you finish within a certain time frame, you're invited back the following year. I
Hmm.
happened to get in one year, and again, it's only 7 miles, but the amount of elevation that you have to do to get over the mountain into Stinson Beach is quite a trek. But there's just something about the mountains and the running and the elevation and running
Hmm.
over to the beach. It was such a spectacular experience. So I still didn't really know that there were longer races than that. I just thought this is sort of this iconic race, and was lucky to get into it, and started with that. And then I learned that there were other groups like Pacific Coast Trails or Coastal Trail Runs, which is
Hmm.
out of California, and they would put on longer distances. And I started to get intrigued, like, oh, there's longer races in the mountains. This is fascinating, and started to enter some of those other races that were longer, like 13 miles. So that would be a half marathon, and then I did a few of those, and then I started learning that there were other races even longer. You could do a 20K or you could do a 30K, and I didn't even know how long that was. And I'm like, what is this? And started to really dabble in some of the longer distances, and the longer that I went, it I just was intrigued, like I can actually go this distance. And well, then how much further can I go? Then I learned that there were 50Ks, and then there were 50 milers, and this was a span of over several years. So I think I started in about 2006 with some of the shorter distances, and progressed through the years to the longer distances. And I think the longest one I had done was like Way Too Cool in Auburn, which is part of that course is on the Western States course. I still didn't even know what Western States was at the time, but was trying my hand at the 30-mile range, and progressed that way. So very slowly started to learn that there was something called Western States, which is 100 miles. And I, at the time, couldn't fathom running that far. Like, people actually do this? How on earth does anybody survive that? And yeah, it was always very fascinating to me. Like, people do this. So yeah.
Well, I did want to just loop back just real quick. So all these, when you're kind of slowly finding these longer distances, you're doing these events, and you had mentioned that you had found that running, through motherhood,
Yeah.
having the children, is that the same time, or is this kind of later on, or is this through that time period?
It's kind of interspersed through that time period. So I would say I had my first daughter in 98, and then by 2006 I was starting to look at some of these longer races, and and then I had, yeah, I think I had all of my daughters, and then I started really getting into the longer stuff. So I would be training. I'd drop them off for school, and I'd go out and I'd train, and then I would pick them up from school. And I was really fitting in training, just of how I could, when I could, with all the responsibilities of motherhood, like most people are doing today. They're trying to
Yeah.
hold down full-time jobs and try to train,
That's
and
why I wanted to loop back, because that's not an easy thing to do.
not.
I have five daughters, and so
Oh,
I know
congrats.
how busy. Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's 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 very exciting, and I only say that because I'm relating to your husband, like with the daughters. It's a
Yeah.
good experience.
Yeah.
Um, but why I bring that up is I know how difficult it is from a male perspective, but from a female perspective,
Hmm.
it's got to be more difficult because you're rearing the children. You just described taking them to school, picking them up. You're doing all the things in between,
Yeah.
and you're still getting the time in to train. So
Yeah.
it's really motivating to hear those kind of stories because we all have those days where you say,
Yeah.
I'm not going to train. But you think about, people like yourself are just out there getting after it, and making it happen,
Yeah.
and creating that schedule, and prioritizing that in their schedule
Yeah.
to make sure that they get it done. That's very, I think that's inspiring.
There,
Um,
yeah, there were times when the kids were really little, I would wake up an hour before my husband had to go to work because at the time I was a stay-at-home mom, and I'd say, look, I'll make you a deal. I'll be out of the house at 5 a.m. I'll be back at 6 in time for you to go off to work, and that was how I would get like a 10K in. So a 10K a day. You've heard that, I'm sure. So for a while at the beginning, I was just like, I just need to let me get some miles in, and I would run like an hour in the morning and I'd get it done with. And then there were times when if the girls had gymnastics or if they had whatever they were doing and I had an hour to kill, I would have my running gear on, or I would have the running shoes in the car, like, oh, I have an hour. I'll just run for an hour or run for 45 minutes. So I literally just pieced it together in those early days.
how
For sure.
cool is that? That's
Yeah.
that's that just shows you the mindset that you had, that you're prioritizing that among your other priorities. And so I could just see you, you drive to the kids' gymnastics, you have your running gear on, you wave goodbye, and
Yeah.
then you just kind of check your watch and say, okay, I turn around at this time and come back.
You
That's
can get,
awesome.
yeah, you can get pretty creative. I remember, like, if my daughter had track practice, like when they were getting older, I'd be like, okay, there's a track. So if I bring my running shoes, then I can be over here doing opposite loops while she's doing her track practice. So I was always thinking of ways to like fit it in. And then I'm a firm believer that, your body, it knows stress. It doesn't necessarily know that you did 10 miles today or you did 5 miles today. It knows the
Mm.
stress. So if you're accumulating a certain amount of mileage in a week, your body adapts to the amount of stress that you're putting it through and the amount of miles that you're doing, like over the span of a week. And so I started to think of my mileage differently. I started to think of, well, if I didn't get 10 in today, that's okay, because maybe tomorrow I can. But cumulatively, by the end of the week, if I was doing 40, 50 miles, it became less important how and when I was getting them done, as long as I was getting them done. It's time on feet and the stress that you put your body under that creates those adaptions that help you build your
Yeah.
endurance.
I think that's an interesting point because I remember when I was newer, I mean, I wouldn't be upset, or anxious, but it may be a little upsetting if I had planned, X amount of miles tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
and then something happened. You
Yes.
know, one of my kids was up in the night, and it
Yeah.
was something, right? Something happened,
Yeah.
and you wake up and you're just like, you kind of beat yourself up a little bit.
Yes.
But I think if you adopt that mindset, that's a great mindset where you say, hey, if I'm looking at it through a stress load
Yeah.
lens versus this is what I have to do today,
Yeah.
as long as you're getting it done, that may help some newer people to the sport alleviate some of that stress of, oh man, I didn't get it done in the exact time, the exact
Yeah.
way I thought. I don't know if you've ever done this, but I find myself sometimes, if I have a longer day and it doesn't work out in the morning, or however, something happens, I'll break it up. I'll do a little in the morning where you
Yes.
can fit it in, and then you fit it somewhere else later in the day when you
Yes.
have an extra 30 or 45 minutes. And maybe that's not the best, and maybe an exercise scientist is going to email me and tell me that's not the best training load or something. But for me, at least, it was a way to say, hey, I still got it done,
Hmm.
and so I don't know if you've ever felt that way where you felt a little bit like discouraged when you're like, oh, I couldn't get it done in the right time, or it didn't happen the way I thought in my mind.
Yeah. Many,
Sounds like
many,
that was a
many.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, many times I would feel exactly that. You'd plan your day and it would go sideways on you many, many times. And if I were to give myself advice back looking at me raising children and trying to fit it all in, I would tell myself, you know, you are doing this fantastic job of raising your kids and they're your priority and you're always there and you're always accountable and you're always there and you show up for them when they need you and whatever they need to do. And if things go sideways in your day, to not blame yourself and to not feel bad about it, because the minute that you can fit it in, you will, and you will be able to fit it in someplace and get the training done. And I know that experts might say that's not the best way, but given the fact that you're a parent and that's what you have available to you, then just give yourself the grace to get it done when you can, because in the end you will get it done because you're that motivated and you will be ready for your race when the time comes. And
I love that.
your children are most important, and you have to stop and deal with whatever it is that they need from you, and your priorities are in the right spot for sure.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think it's something to do, and maybe not all humans are like this, but when it doesn't go according to plan, for some
Yeah.
reason, it's
Yeah.
that triggering stress, kind of anxious feeling, and you're like, wait, why am I doing this to myself? Like this is self-imposed. You know, no one is
Yeah.
it's in the exterior coming and saying you have to do it at this time. You know, so
Yeah.
I love that. So you keep leveling up. You're
Yeah.
training through rearing your kids and uh, having your family. So when's the first time that I mean, you started hearing about Western states, you started hearing about these longer events.
Yeah.
When did you start to think, hey, I might want to tackle one of these longer ones?
I think after races like Way Too Cool, and knowing that I could finish it and it was really satisfying and the experience was amazing, or I started to do longer races in the headlands. I started to train with a group of folks called the Marin Running Club once a week or twice a week, and we would go into the mountains there above San Francisco, and I just learned all the trails there. And then I started to do my own training. Like I just had this curiosity about how far I could go, and I thought, not a lot of people want to run as long as I do, and I just want to go. And so I would, on a day off, I would go into the Marin Headlands and I would say, today I want to do 25 miles. And I wouldn't necessarily put a timestamp on it, or I would just like, I want to do this much mileage today. And I would go and I'd have my hydration with me or my food with me, and go train that way. And I can't explain how satisfying that was, but it just, the more that I would do, the more I wanted to do. And so I started training longer race runs by myself. And I always had it in the back of my mind to do something longer, like really long. But
Mm.
like you, as a parent, I was always putting my daughters first, and and then I was working full time, and I just thought, I can't really devote the amount of time I need to do a long race really well. And it's only been recent couple of years after my daughters all went off to college, that I really felt that I had the time to really devote to the longer distances. And so I had it in the back of my mind for a long time, tackling hundreds. And then I thought, boy, if I could do that, then what about the 200? And then once my girls were off in college, I thought, now I'm just going to basically, I'm going to work and I'm going to train, because that's all I really wanted to do. And after doing Moab in 2024, I just thought, wow, this is where I want to be. This is the community I want to be in. This is what I want to work for. And the spirit of people around me tackling the same distances and everything that they go through, it just inspired me so much to watch everyone covering the same terrain, dealing with the same problems, and everybody had their own story and they all accomplished it in their own way, in their own time. And it was just amazing to me. And I just thought, wow, I just want to do this more and more and more. And then um, the 300-mile race was announced, and I thought, oh boy, I'm in trouble. And I just knew, like, if I don't sign up for this, I am going to regret it and it's going to sell out fast. And I just thought, I am probably out of my mind and I'm just going to throw my name in the hat. And I kind of didn't look back. I just thought, this could be the biggest mistake of my life. But I'm just going to throw my name in the hat. And I did. And I thought, well, here we go. Let's just try this.
So how cool is this? You have such an amazing story where you're starting off running, well, mountain biking, fine
Yeah.
running,
Yeah.
you meet your husband,
Yeah.
7 miles, half marathons, and who would have thought? I mean, isn't that wild to think if you could go back and talk to your younger self and be like, listen, one day we're going to do a 300 miler. You'd be like, what are you talking about? In a
No way.
car, on a bike, you know?
And even when you say that out loud, I somehow naively don't conceptualize how far that is until you start looking at a map and go, oh boy, oh
Hmm.
man, how many days is that? Like, oh boy, because Moab was like 4.5 days and then Arizona is like 7. And I thought, 7 days is a solid week. That's 6 nights out there, unless you can do it faster. And I
Yeah.
just thought, am I nuts? Is this really I don't know, but I was intrigued and fascinated at the same time. And I just thought, I'm gonna just put my mind to the fact that I'm gonna be in the desert for 7 days. And I just put my mind in that place. Like, that's what it's gonna be. That's what this is. And I just trained as much as I could. And I did things like, I'm a big fan of training for 24 hours. So I would train a 24-hour segment just by myself or with my pacer. So like on a couple of days off, I would get up at 9 in the morning and head out the door and I would run for 24 hours and pretend as though I was doing an event.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get used to running through the night and being tired. I didn't want that to be a surprise when I actually got out to Moab or to Arizona. So that was tremendously helpful. I learned so much by doing those 24-hour training sessions. I did 3 of those before Moab and learned
Wow.
the I learned the most doing those. I
Well, yeah, I
learned,
mean, that's what they say, right? Train like your race. I mean, you
yeah,
can't get any more train like your race than that.
100%. I would fill my pack with what I thought that the gear I would need as though I was going to be out there in Moab. And sometimes I would pick a spot where I could leave my car as my aid station. So I'd go
Mm,
run in a loop and I'd do some loops and come back to my car. I'm like, okay, I need to change my shoes. I need to change my socks, or I need to take a nap, and then I'd take off again. But my promise to myself was 24 hours. You're not stopping until you hit 24 hours. And I didn't care how much mileage I did. It wasn't about the mileage. It was about the endurance of it. Like, I don't know what that feels like to run for 24 hours. I don't know. So the first time I did it, I think I covered like 69 miles.
wow.
And ironically, I didn't get sleepy. I think I was so amped on just doing it that I didn't get
Mhm.
sleepy the first time. The second time I did it was, I got more sleepy around mile, like hour 22. I think I was starting to get sleepy, like, oh, okay, this is what this feels like. Now, how am I going to deal with this? Do I take a nap? What do I do? So, but those I learned the most from about myself.
Yeah. I have done some longer overnight stuff during training, but never that long. That's very impressive. That would that's a huge time commitment and mental commitment where, like you said, it wasn't the distance, it wasn't the time, well, it was the 24 hours, but it was, I just need to be out here for this time. I don't
Yeah.
care about my pace. I don't
Hmm.
care about my mileage,
Yeah.
elevation. It's really just, what does it feel like to be out all night? What does it feel like to get tired?
Yeah.
It's funny to say that out loud because we all know what it's like to be tired,
Yeah.
but in intra race, I never knew what it felt like to be exhausted and tired until
Yeah.
I did, when I was in Cocodona. I remember my pacer was like, "What's wrong? You're really moving slow." I said, I don't know what's wrong. I said, I keep eating gels, I keep taking salt, and I drinking plenty of water. I said, I've never felt this before. And
Yeah.
he's the one that's like, well, maybe you need to take a nap.
You know,
But you never
that
think about it.
yeah, that's the interesting thing about sleep deprivation is you can be fed, you can be hydrated, you can be, but if you haven't slept, it's like your whole body slows down. And I learned that it's really important to take trail naps. When you get that tired, you're not moving well, and you need to take a 10-minute or 15-minute trail nap. And it sounds ridiculous that 15 minutes or 10 minutes would really help, but I found that that is exactly what I need. And I get up and I'm like, okay, I can think straight again. What do I need to do? And then I start again. And it's fascinating how that works. It's really
Yeah, that
fascinating.
mental reset. It's like almost like a reset.
It
It,
is.
I mean, you don't feel rested. It just
No.
resets your mind where you go, oh, yeah, I'm back in it now. You still
Yeah.
feel tired. Obviously, you're exhausted, but
Yeah.
it's the mental thing that, at least for me, that's what I noticed is like a mental reset.
Yeah, I remember in Arizona, I would be running, and I remember one long stretch on the bike path. We had a 30-mile stretch on the bike path, and I was getting so sleepy, I almost didn't notice. You know, like when you're driving your car and you're doing this nodding off thing. It's the same thing when you're running, and you don't almost notice it until you bob your head and like, wait, I'm still standing. How am I still standing? And I'm like, okay, I need to sit down. I need to close my eyes for 10 minutes. And then I would do that, and I'd get up like, okay, I can at least think straight, and now I can keep moving. It's fascinating how it
Yeah,
works.
very, very interesting. Uh, I'd love to hear like the neuroscience behind it, but
Yeah.
maybe someday. Well, so this is awesome. You're tackling your longer distances now that your kids are out of the house, they're in
Yeah.
college,
Yeah.
and you tackle Moab. What year did you do Moab?
That was 2024. That was last year.
2024. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And so
Yeah.
then they announced the monster, and
Yeah.
naturally you
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea." Um,
Naturally.
I have to ask,
Yeah.
the for me, I would be very worried about, maybe not worried, but I would be consciously concerned about doing a race in Montana.
Yeah.
Because I'm from Arizona, so I'm
Yeah.
here in the desert. I know how hot it is. I know all that. I train here in the summer. But if I was to sign up for Crazy Mountain, I think's in Montana, or some of these other
Yes.
races in Montana,
Yeah.
I'd be like, I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah.
It would be a
Exactly.
little nerve wracking. Was there anything like that? Any feelings like that as you were thinking about? I mean, you'd already done Moab, and that's in the desert. But any feelings like that around coming to Arizona?
I was concerned about the heat because
Mm.
in Montana we are still experiencing temperatures no higher than like 40 degrees, and it just snowed again. Like, so I'm training in the snow. I'm training in 30 degrees and 40 degrees, and I keep hearing that Arizona is going to be like 77, 80 degrees,
Oh
and I'm
yeah.
like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I actually started doing some sauna training. There's a place called Hot Works up here, and you can go in and you can actually do some hot cycling. So I'd go in there, turn the temperature up to like 100 degrees, and spend 15 minutes to half an hour cycling in the sauna and just passing out in there. And I thought, okay. And I still didn't feel prepared for the heat. The heat was quite a surprise. And also the dry air in Arizona.
Mm.
My mouth got so dry, and it was just the constant dry air, and that was an issue, part of that race. Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
I could see that. I mean, I experienced that as well, living here and when we do events in the summer,
yeah,
late spring. Um, but I'd love to dig a little bit more into the monster, because when we started off, I kind of left everyone with a little cliffhanger. But
yeah.
I'd love to hear more about the actual event. I was lucky enough to pace towards
Mm.
the end, so I definitely didn't see anything in the beginning. But I'd love to hear some more details about when you started and getting to Mount Lemon and climbing. I heard there was a ton of snow up there. Maybe it was over exaggerated, but I heard there was a lot of snow up there, at least
Uh-huh.
for us, at least
Oh,
for us in
wow.
Arizona.
Okay. When did you guys hit it? Because when we hit it, there wasn't any snow. It wasn't
Oh,
snow.
see, that's interesting.
Ah,
So when my guy's team went through, I'd have to look at his Strava and see what time it was.
yeah.
But they said it was so cold up there and there was snow. Now,
Really?
people
Okay.
from Arizona, if there's just a little bit of snow, they're going to say there's a ton of snow. Like, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, did you see the snow?"
That's 9 feet of
Because
snow.
yeah,
Yeah.
we if it's below 60 degrees, we all have jackets on. We're freezing. So the second we see snow, it's like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I heard there was snow up there, and so if I
Yeah.
misunderstood that or misheard it, but I did hear it was plenty cold, at least for us. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more about the actual event,
Okay.
and because I only saw it from about a 62-mile section, and that's a very small fraction of that race, which is kind of crazy to say.
Yeah. I was in the third group. So we started, there was an 11 o'clock start, a 12 o'clock start, a 1 and a 2 p.m. start. I started at 1 p.m. And the first, I had to go 75 miles before I could see any crew. And the first segment was pretty easy. I think it was about 8 miles, and that was pretty, like 1,200 feet of climbing. It was not that big of a deal. And the second segment was a little bit harder, another 8 miles or something. No, I'm sorry, it was 22 miles. That was a really long segment, 22 miles. And in that one, I was worried about water because they had told us when you get to the end of 22 miles, they could only give us a certain amount of water per runner, and I was a little worried about that. But I was in good shape water wise. Once I got there, I thought I still have enough water. I'm just going to top off and keep moving. Um, I saw crew at mile 75, and I think I had gone through the night already. I had gone 24 hours, and I didn't see them until like midday the next day. And immediately I was pretty sleepy. And I told my crew person, my crew chief, her name is Laura. She was fabulous. I just said, I'm just going to climb in the back of your car and I need to sleep for like 30 minutes. And so I got in the habit of sleeping every time I saw my crew. So I slept for like 30 minutes and then would get watered up and ate some food and go back out. Um, the next section was another big climb, beautiful, and I forget the name of it, but we went through this incredible valley. It was just beautiful, and I ended up getting to I was leaving an aid station and teamed up with another young man. I think his name was Frank. He was number 225, and we ended up climbing out of that aid station through another canyon through the second night. So I felt really comfortable having been with kind of a trail buddy through the second night. And then when I got to mile 105, I think there was Tiger Mine aid station, and I was able to pick up my pacer there. And that we had one section to go to Oracle, I believe, and then from Oracle up Mount
Mm-hmm.
Lemon. And Mount Lemon, we climbed that at night. And I'm, in hindsight, really happy that it was at night because I think mentally, if I'd seen the enormity of that, I would have been harder mentally to deal with that. But and I was pretty tired. But my pacer, um, he he was going a little bit faster than I was going, but it encouraged me to climb more
Mm-hmm.
consistently and try and keep up with him. And I would just kind of look up at him and go, okay, there he is. And I wouldn't really look around, and I had nothing that I could really see. I couldn't really see how big this mountain was. All I could see in front of me was the pitch, and the pitch was pretty steep in places. And I just thought, don't look at that. Just keep, just keep moving. And we got to the top of Mount Lemon, saw our crew again, and went to sleep for like another, I think, an hour at that one. And then I started to have some trouble with my feet, some blisters on my heels. And so my feet were giving me some trouble. And I remember after Mount Lemon, there's a 6,900 foot drop that you go down I don't know if you saw that section, but my feet were really bothering me going down that. And I remember being not in the greatest mood going down and out, but it was gorgeous. And it was it was the valley going down out of there. And it's a little bit of a blur at the moment, but we kept plugging along. And I think, some of the problems that we had were we had brought 8 batteries for the headlamps. He had a headlamp and like 8 batteries. And I guess we had gone through all the batteries. And so one of the nights we're trying to move quickly and my headlamp was going out. So I'd have to stop and get my backpack out and like find another battery. And then that battery was going out. And we stopped like 10 times and we were both getting really frustrated. And we managed to, and then we thought, well, I have a handheld, and if the worst case scenario, I can get my iPhone out and use the flashlight there. So that was an interesting problem to have. And then my pacer went a really long way with me. He went about 162 miles, and his knee started to bother him
Wow.
towards the end, and it was the second to the last aid station that we came down into, and he passed out in one of the chairs to go to sleep, and I was we had to be out of there at 5 in the morning. I think we got there at 3:30, so we had plenty of time. So he slept for a little while, and we got out of that aid station, and the second to the last aid station, I forget the name of it, but he stopped because his knee was really bothering him, and I took a short nap, and then the very last section was this really the temperatures were really hot by this time, and it was the
Hmm.
last canyon section that you had to climb up and then down to the road, and then it was about a mile, 1.8 miles to the finish line. And the temperature was like 90 degrees, and I got to the top of this climb, and I knew that I just had to go downhill, and I had run out of water, and I was so thirsty, and so I didn't have any saliva, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I just really messed up, because there wasn't any more scheduled aid stations to the end. And I thought, how am I going to make it to the end of this? And I think I was about 4 miles away from the finish line. And I knew, as much as I knew, was that I had to go down about a mile to the road, and then it was a mile and an eight to the finish line. And I thought, there's no water, and I just have to try and make it. And when I came down out of the canyon up to the road, they had put up an aid station with like 2 volunteers and some water. And I just started crying because I was really thought I was in trouble. And I went up to them, and they're like, are you okay? What do you need? I said, I'm completely out of water, and I'm so dehydrated. And they sat me down, and I drank like 3 bottles of electrolytes, and I had them pack my shirt with ice. I said, stuff as much ice in there as you can, because my core temperature was too high, and my heart rate was elevated, and I could tell that I was like in a bad space. And I finally calmed myself down, and I said, so how many people are behind me? How many and he goes, you're it. And that it was like in that moment that I realized, oh my gosh, I'm it. I'm the last one. People are waiting for me. I'm like, oh shoot, I got to get
I
up and I got
love
to
it.
start moving. I thought, oh my, they want to finish this race. All the volunteers want to go home. I'm like, I'm the last person, and I'm sitting here. And so I just said, okay, all right, I'm gonna get up, and I'm gonna go. And he goes, it's a mile and 8, and he gave me a fist bump. He goes, you can do this. And it was in that moment that I thought, I am actually gonna finish this. I'm actually gonna finish this race. And it was such a surreal moment. And I started walking, and it makes me teary even to think about it, because it's one of those things where you plan and you plan and you train and you train, and 300 miles seems unfathomable, and yet I was about to finish. And I thought, I can't even believe this. I've been out here for so long. I don't even know what my family looks like anymore. And I just thought, I'm actually going to do this. And so I walked for like a mile. And then at this stretch of road where you can see the turnoff into the dirt parking lot where the finish line is. And I saw my pacer standing there, and he runs over to me, and he's holding up his phone, and he had FaceTimed my daughters. And so my
Oh.
daughters are FaceTiming with me, and I'm running, and all I can hear him say is, "Go, Mama, go! You're gonna do it!" And of course, I start crying some more, and I was just yelling at them, "I love you so much!" And I turned to go into the dirt parking lot, and that's when I saw all the people
Mhm.
at the human bridge that they had made, and I was like, this is so amazing. This is so amazing. I was just blown away, and I was crying and running to the finish line, and all these people were cheering, and I just thought, where else can you be the last person in a race and everybody is cheering for you? And I was overwhelmed with gratitude and the kindness, and I ran through the lines of people, and everybody's clapping and smiling and fist bumping, and I got to the end, and people were hugging me, people I didn't even know, and they were just like, congratulations. And I was overwhelmed. I just thought, where else can you find this kind of community? It was an amazing experience, just amazing. And Candace came over and gave me a hug, and she was lovely. And I can't even, it'll be one of the most poignant moments of my life, just having that kind of support from everyone and volunteers. And I think that's what can be said for the human spirit, is that everybody there knows what that experience is like, is that you just tried so hard and you
Mhm.
accomplished this goal, and everybody else did too. Everyone did that finished. And it's I love the community, the running community.
Well, I was watching, obviously not from the finish line, but from the comfort of actually this chair while I was working,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's so inspiring. I remember watching it and just thinking, oh my gosh, I think it speaks, like you alluded to the community, you alluded to the support, to have the feeling of you know hundreds of people watching you and saying, oh, this is the coolest, this is so great, keep it up, you're doing so good. It's just not the people at the finish line, it's everybody watching,
yeah,
uh, you know everybody uh, at the finish line, all the other contestants who either finished themselves or didn't finish.
yeah,
All eyes are on the DFL, the dead last person, right? And there's no other sport that I know of that is so celebratory of the last place person. And I
yeah,
think that speaks volumes for the trail community, for what this sport, these events are all about. You
yeah,
know, First place is cool. Pete, good job. You know, Pete and T Spike and Josh. That's awesome and should be
yeah,
celebrated. But
yeah,
the last place person, you were out there the longest. You grinded it out more than anybody out there. You never gave up, and everybody is rallying with you, going, "This is amazing. This is awesome," and it's just celebrated. I don't know if they do it in Candace's events, but I know in a lot of race series they actually hand out awards for the
oh
DFL,
wow, yeah,
and I I just know that. I mean, I was at the Mogollon Monster. I came in at the golden hour. I wasn't last. I was close, but
yeah,
I actually met the last place guy who came in last, and he on the trail together earlier in the day, and they gave him an award. It was the
yeah,
coolest thing.
hmm,
And I just
hmm,
remember watching it and just being so humbled by it and going, "Oh my gosh, these people, it's like a badge of honor." I mean, you stuck it out the longest. You
I,
did it.
and all I was expecting was like, wow, I was so personally satisfied that I didn't quit on myself. My one thing I promised myself was like, don't quit on yourself. It's just, don't quit on yourself. Just finish. And that's what I was just expecting to do. But to have all of that celebration at the end was just heartwarming, and more than I was expecting. And everyone who trains for these things goes through so much tremendous trial and error and mistakes and all the things that go wrong. To just finish is the thing that we're trying to accomplish, but to have people supporting you like that was mind blowing. It was, I didn't expect it really. It was
Well,
amazing.
it it's awesome, and I'd like to know, your daughters are obviously watching you on the tracker, I'm sure, and you just told the story. They were FaceTiming you as you're going across.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, how amazing is it that they have this example, this woman to look up to? That's so amazing that I'm sure they're gonna. Everyone goes through hard times. So I'm sure they're
Yeah.
gonna go through hard times.
Yeah.
And what that example that you set for them, it just speaks so loudly that I can imagine it helps them get through those moments, just like it helps everyone else who watched you do that go through those moments where you're like, hey, if this lady from Montana can spend 7 days in the desert, well, I can get out of bed and I can go running today. Because gosh dang,
Yeah.
man, that 7 days
Yeah.
in the desert, and
Yeah.
again, it's not like it's wintertime. It's getting hot. And so
Yeah.
you experienced it firsthand. Well, I remember when I was watching it and kind of reading the comments, and someone put it in perspective like 7 days, and they said the exact time, but I just
Yeah.
started thinking a whole week. Holy cow,
Yeah.
that's next level. I mean, I don't know, Caroline, where do you go from here? You, you got one of the most prestigious awards in ultra at the biggest race that I know of.
Yeah.
What's next? Do you have any other races planned, or any adventures, or taking
Oh,
some well-deserved time off, or what's the?
oh, thank you. I do want to touch on one thing that you just mentioned is that you
Sure.
asked me about how my daughters reacted. Um, One of the things I didn't mention so far was that I was divorced back in 2010, and so my daughters and I survived together, and we've worked hard together, and they've always seen me running and having goals that I set for myself in terms of distance and stuff, and I think by doing that, and they see the training and they saw the failures and they saw all the mishaps and the injuries, and I always would get back up and keep trying and keep trying. um it And I always told them, like, if you want something hard enough to never quit, just never give up, no matter what life throws at you, because you will get there and you can do it. And it's worth trying, because when you get there, you will know that you fought for it, and you've accomplished it, and there's nothing more satisfying than that. And so they all have done very well personally. They've all, like my oldest daughter just graduated from grad school, and that was a grind. And she just became a doctor of physical therapy, and she just got
Wow.
her license. And then my middle daughter's in medical school. She wants to be a physician's assistant, so she's working really hard. And my youngest daughter is applying to grad school. And I think that when you lead by example, you teach your children, okay, I know that this road is hard and I know that this thing is big and scary, but if I keep putting one foot in front of the other, there is nothing I cannot accomplish. And ironically, I was talking to them yesterday by FaceTime. That's the first time that I was able to really talk to all three of them after the race, and they just were really appreciative of the fact that I didn't quit. It was like, you didn't quit, Mom. You didn't quit. They would track me every day and say, okay, well, she's still going. She's still going. She's still going. And oh my gosh, she might finish this. And so it was a fun conversation to have, but also to show them that, yeah, the goals can be big and scary, but if you believe in yourself, don't quit on yourself. And so they're living the example themselves by going after their goals too. So, um,
Yeah,
and
I'm glad you looped us back into that, because that's really sweet. I really appreciate you sharing that. I
yeah,
mean, what better example for determination and grit. All those different endeavors they're undertaking. Physical therapy, your graduate degree, all that. That's
Yeah.
not easy stuff. And
Not easy.
either is running in the desert for 7 days, but that's what a great example. I mean, I don't think your daughters could ever look back and go, oh, my mom, she worked hard, but she's a little lazy. It's like, no, my mom was just getting after it every
Yeah.
day, working, you know,
Yeah.
training, doing these events. I mean, it almost gives them no place to be like, yeah, but I'm just going to kind of take it easy. Like they're all doing their own endeavors and having a lot of success because, I mean, I'm sure they're determined women as well. But to have
Yeah.
such a great example to learn from, that's awesome.
I think when you're a parent such as yourself and you show your children that whatever it is that you're up against, no matter how hard it is, that you find a pathway through it, you find a solution. The thing is difficult, but there's a way through it. You really teach them life skills, like they're in graduate school or they're now embarking on a professional career. Like, yeah, but no matter what it is that you're facing, if you keep going and keep trying, you will find a solution. So it's a really ultra running is a metaphor for life. Just never quit on yourself. Believe in that thing, no matter how many times people say you're crazy. When I signed up for Arizona, I had numerous people say, "You're crazy." And I was like, maybe, but I'm going to do this thing. I'm just going to do it. So even your detractors, just believe in yourself, because if you can see it in your mind's eye, if you can see yourself succeeding, then you can. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but yeah.
You did say that towards the beginning of our conversation, and I kind of made a mental note that I wanted to come back to it, but you just gave me a great segue back into that. Is you said at one point that you would visualize yourself in the desert running.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because it kind of creates that pathway in your mind where you're starting to see yourself do this thing. And I think that's when we talk about detractors or people, I don't even want to drive that far. You're crazy, whatever they
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
because they can't see themselves doing that thing. It's
Yes.
so outside of their window of
Yes.
understanding. And I'm not saying that they're bad for that. It's just that's the life that they're currently living. They don't understand it's possible. But if they were to visualize that like you described, they could then start to see the possibility. Because unless you're seeing yourself as that person or seeing yourself as maybe kind of a hero that you look up to, another woman in ultra or another guy in or whoever,
Yeah.
you start to look up to those people and not see yourselves as them, but you see yourself kind of blazing that trail like, oh, this is possible. I
Yeah.
I can see myself doing this.
Yeah. I remember when I was signing up for Moab and then eventually Arizona, I asked myself, what scares me most about this? What is it? What would be the most scary thing about this? And that's why I started to do the 24-hour training runs, because I thought, I don't know what going through the night feels like. I don't
Mm.
know what that is. And I thought, how do I know what that is? I thought, well, I should do it. And then I thought, well, how am I going to do that? And I thought, well, just go out your front door and run. I have a pretty safe neighborhood and I can use my house as an aid station. I just started to get really creative with my training. Like, what am I scared of? Then figure that out before you get there. I wanted to start on the starting line not being fearful. I wanted to start thinking, whatever happens, I'm ready for it. This is going to be the hardest thing I ever do. But when it goes bad, I have some tools in my chest and I have thought this through. So that's when I'll use those. Hopefully, I don't have to use them, but then I will use those tools that I've kind of prepared for. So I'm a big fan of the saying, and I don't know whose quote this belongs to, but it says, make a plan and then plan for the plan to fall apart. So you can go into it with like, I'm going to do XYZ, and then it gets completely shot out of the water and you have to improvise and improvise and improvise. But if you're ready to improvise and you have some backup plans in place, then you can pretty much tackle anything. All I wanted was the mental attitude is like, I think I can conquer whatever this is going to throw at me. Unless it's something I am completely unprepared for, then I think I can accomplish this. And that's how I trained. I trained my mind as well as my body to figure it out. Like, what am I going to do when I'm in 36 hours by myself? What am I going
Mhm.
to do? And I can't keep food down, or my headlamp goes out, or my blisters are out of this world painful. Have a plan to take care of yourself before you get to crew. And it takes all the scariness away. And then it becomes like, okay, I think I have enough confidence to mitigate the problems to get through it. Yeah.
That's an interesting concept. We always think about training the body,
Yeah.
getting out elevation, heat training, but rarely do we talk about training your mind because
Yes.
I know it's not a muscle, but in the sense it kind of is a muscle where you're training that grit, you're training that determination, you're training all that. Like you said, those 24-hour runs, you're working out all those kinks, and you're also working on your mind, thinking, this is my biggest fear. Well, then I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get out there and do it. And what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly.
And you go work all that out. So that the mental side's a big thing because I've noticed people a did not finish or you have a bad moment or something like that. I, I think people could really benefit from mentally strengthening themselves.
I
Um,
I personally believe that these longer races are 95% mental. And what I mean by that is is the ability to know that you can handle the things that go wrong. Because I used to think, boy, I hope nothing goes wrong and I'll finish this. But I quickly learned on these longer distances that pretty much everything goes wrong. And you have to be prepared for that. So if you
yes.
go into it going, when these things happen, not if,
Hmm.
but when they do, this is what I can do about it. This is what I can do about it. And when you go into a race that way, it's there's a certain amount of confidence that you're like, okay, whatever this thing's going to throw at me, I think I can mitigate it and I will be able to keep moving. So I think training your body to do the distance, very, very important. But if your mind isn't made up and you don't know that you can handle all the things that go wrong, it doesn't matter how well trained you are because your mind will stop you. Your mind will stop
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I remember when I did an Ironman years and years ago, and a friend of mine who had done Ironman before, he's like, "Oh, I'm so excited! I want to help volunteer." So he volunteered as a kayak guy in the water.
Yeah.
And after the event, we went to dinner. Him and his wife and my wife. We went out, and he was telling me these stories, and he was telling me multiple people were so scared in the water they were clinging to his kayak.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And I was like, well, what did they say to you? And he was like, well, they just said that they weren't ready. And
Oh.
and and he goes, I would ask him, like he was speaking specifically about this one woman. He said, I asked her, well, you obviously trained for swimming. She goes, oh yeah, I train mostly in the ocean. And he looked at her and goes, this is a lake. He goes, this is easy,
Yeah.
and he was trying to encourage her, but
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
quit.
No.
And that's what and so what reminded me of this story is in your explanation about mentally preparing. He was saying that these people that were quitting, and that, like, this specifically, this lady grabbing onto his kayak and
Yeah.
just being so scared, he was saying it's almost like she had trained her body to do it, but she hadn't really figured it out up here that she
Yeah.
was going to do this thing.
Yeah.
The ocean's got sharks. It's got stuff that can kill
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Tempe Town Lake in Tempe, Arizona might have some big fish in it, but it has nothing that's going to hurt you. And
Yeah.
so, but the mind is so powerful. And
Yeah.
like you said, zeroed in mentally, nothing is going to stop you. I mean, maybe a big injury or some horrible thing happening, but if
Yeah.
your mind is zeroed in, boy, that not much is going to stop you.
Exactly right. Yeah, a firm believer that the mental prep for something like this is equally, if not more important to handle it for sure.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Very, very inspiring, Carolyn. I'm so glad you've come on. As we kind of wrap up
Uh-huh.
your amazing story, it's obviously not over, but there's still tomorrow. But as we wrap up this discussion, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Maybe any advice you have for people that are currently training, or advice to your younger self that you would share with people that are kind of getting into the sport?
If you want to trail run, it doesn't matter if you have never done it. It doesn't matter the size you are. It doesn't matter. Don't let any of those kinds of concerns stop you. The important thing is to begin. If you begin, you will be amazed at how well you'll progress. And if you want it and just keep consistently trying, to just never give up, because when I started, I was a mountain biker. I never thought one day I would be running 200 or 300 mile races. I never thought that. It didn't occur to me. But the more consistent that I was, the more I was able to progress. And so I've been running for maybe 30 plus years now, and it's consistency. I happen to love trail running, so it wasn't really a problem for me to get out there and train. I just love the process of training. But anybody trying, and anybody trying who has other obligations, most people have families and jobs, but if you can spend an hour going to a coffee shop and getting a coffee, maybe that hour you could throw on your shoes and start run walking, and just be consistent 2 or 3 times a week, and then pretty soon you'll find that you could do a little bit more, and your body adapts amazingly fast, and it actually wants to move, is what I've found. And so for people not to be afraid, and if you want it, you can do it. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say anything else on top of that, because that was very, very beautifully said, and I think
Oh,
a perfect explanation of how to get started. So
yeah.
another thing I wanted to mention is I'm really appreciative of my guests coming on, and so every guest I send them a gift from Death March Running Company. It's one of my
Oh.
favorite ultra brands.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'll get your information offline, and I'd love to send you something as a token of my appreciation for coming on, and
Oh.
also because I love their stuff. But um, again, thank you so much for this. Your story is incredible. I mean, 30 years of trail running, that's just it's amazing. It's so awesome. You've seen it
Oh,
grow. You've seen the sport just, I'm sure, just take off like a rocket, and
yeah.
it's not slowing down anytime soon. So awesome story. Thank you so much for sharing it with everybody. If somebody wanted to follow you, is there do you have a social media where someone could follow your story, or Strava or anything?
Yes, I'm on Strava. It's just Carolyn Garriott Cunha, so my last name and my maiden name. I also have a Facebook page with the same name. Yeah, so I post a lot on Strava, all the training that I do, and I talk about, different events that I'm working on, and yeah, you can follow me there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. And I definitely will be following your journey.
Oh, thank you, Christian.
Thanks, Carolyn. Have a nice night.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye-bye. Bye.